Go ahead and record. Good afternoon, everyone. And Nora, thank you so much for this great partnership with the Department of Disabilities. It's really great to be involved and participating in this campaign through October. So thank everyone for joining us for this conversation this afternoon. We're going to be talking about who has an eye on your money, or going over some consumer scams and issues to try and keep your money to yourself. So as you know, my name is Sue Rogan. I'm an accredited financial counselor, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships with the Cash Campaign of Maryland. As you can see, CASH stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope. We're a statewide nonprofit that works with different partners across the state to provide different programs and services to help people build their financial well-being or their financial stability. So some of the programs I just want to make sure that you're aware of, over on the corner here on the left, is our free tax preparation services. So if families earn under $57,000 a year, they can have their taxes prepared for free. And so we really want to offer this service to people so they not only get their taxes done and can save the money from paying a paid tax preparer, but also get connected to other services that can help them really maximize the refund that they may be getting. So all of our tax preparers are certified through a rigorous IRS program that makes sure that everybody is going to be getting all the tax credits and deductions that they're eligible for. And we're actually preparing back taxes right now too. If people have missed a few years of back taxes, we're able to help them with that as well. The other image in the center is the advocacy work we do. So we work with elected officials to educate them on the needs of the people that we are serving, who are primarily low to moderate income individuals. So we're very excited to say that several years ago, we worked with other organizations to help pass a law to cap the fees and interest on payday loans. We recognize that sometimes people need some cash before their pay actually is going to hit their account, and therefore they need to borrow some. But what we noticed is that the interest and fees on these payday loans previously was somewhere upwards of 400%. And that seems pretty predatory and unfair. So we worked to get a law passed that in Maryland, all the fees and interest on payday loans are capped at 33%. And then the other program on the far right is our financial coaching and financial planning program. These are two separate programs. The financial coaching program is where you can work one-on-one with a dedicated coach who's been trained, who is going to help you set financial goals, whatever it may be that's important to you, create the steps that are needed to get to those goals, and then work with you on the journey to achieving those goals. This is used through an app and a partnership with a group called Trust Plus, where you would be meeting virtually with a coach for as long as you feel you need the support. The financial planning program is a little bit different. This is where certified financial planners, or CFPs, basically the gold standard in financial advising, have actually donated their time to us to help people prepare an individual financial plan. So you get to meet with the CFP for 2 times. One is to go over questions that they have regarding your financial situation right now, looking at it holistically. So how are you doing not only with income and expenses, but how's your insurance? Are you covered appropriately? What are your retirement goals? How are you working towards that? Are there any other goals that you have? So in the second meeting, they'll actually give you your personalized financial plan for you to take and then be able to implement it. Some people have actually thought about using the CFP program first, getting that personalized plan, and then working with their coach to actually implement it. So those are both available to you. I also want to let you know about our website, www.mdcashacademy.org. This website was created to host and to be one place that consumers can go look for credible, fact-based financial education that is not selling or recommending any particular financial products or services. Because we know it's hard to learn about money. Maybe we didn't get it consistently through school or necessarily always through friends and family. So we want to provide this place for you to be able to attend workshops such as the one today and many others on different financial topics to get any information you feel you need to help build your financial well-being. So right now, of course, they're all webinars. We do have some webinars in Spanish. We do have some with American Sign Language. We have many of them that have been recorded, so you can take a look at it whenever you want to. Maybe it's while you're cooking dinner or just a quiet moment, you can go and take a look at them. So please feel free to check out that website and see any other classes that you'd like to attend. And then I want to make sure you know about also our resource pages on Cash Academy that we created due to the financial implications of this pandemic. So all of these topics listed here, the utilities, business, replacing income, all of those have specific resources that are available to help people really lessen the financial impact of this health crisis. And so with that, that's a little bit about Cash Campaign and who we are and what we do. I also want to let you know that prior to joining Cash, I was an investigator with Montgomery County Office of Consumer Protection, which brings me to bringing consumer protection into financial education. Because as important as it is to create that spending plan and budget, if you were victimized by a consumer crime, you've probably lost a fair amount of money, and we want to avoid that. So thank you again for coming today and trying to get some information to protect yourself from scams or fraud. So just one thing to talk about is that anytime that there is a consumer scam or a mistake, it's going to mean that you're going to lose money. And while consumer protection agencies and others can sometimes recover the money for the consumer, it is so much better if we avoid giving that money out and then try to get it back, because it's so difficult to sometimes catch the perpetrators of this fraud or to be able to get any money back, because maybe if they're around, they've actually spent it themselves. So really make sure that you're getting information to protect yourself. So if you can, in the chat box, name 1 or 2 scams that you're aware of. Anything that you've heard of, somebody calling you or texting you or something you're like, I don't think that sounds quite right. So what kind of scam can you name, and what can you put in the chat box for us? Anything that you can think of. I know I've recently had phone calls from someone alleging to be the Social Security Administration telling me that my Social Security number is compromised. However, I know it is not. So let's see, I think.
One about an auto warranty expiration.
Oh boy, they are calling all the time, aren't they? That has really been happening the past few months. Yeah, auto warranty is a good one. If you don't know any others, we are going to go through them, but I just want to see if you're aware of any scams or phone calls that you've been concerned about getting. Okay, well, let's jump into what is the issue. So this consumers, oh, no,
We do have one more call saying that you won a lottery.
Oh boy, that has been around forever. People have been using that one, right? And it's very exciting when you get that call. It's like, yes, I won some money. No, you didn't, because the next statement's probably going to be, but you have to pay taxes on it. And you have to give that to me first before we can give you that money. Or you have to give me your checking account number so I can put the amount of money that you won into your checking account. Then the next thing that happens is your checking account is drained. So thank you very much for putting that in there. That's a really good one. So you can see from this data here, the Consumer Sentinel Network from 2020 is data that's put together with the Federal Trade Commission coming from other consumer protection agencies across the country. So you can see there were 4.7 million reports or complaints from consumers. And the top 3 reports or complaints, the first one is identity theft. We're definitely going to talk about that. Imposter scams and online shopping and negative reviews. And then if you take a look at the other numbers, so there's 2.2 million fraud reports. So not just a complaint against a business, but outright fraud or scams. And 34% of those who had that report actually experienced a loss. And there was $3.3 billion of total fraud losses, which is an average for each one who filed a complaint of $311. In addition, in the last quarter of 2020, it was really disconcerting and awful that during the pandemic, the amount of fraud complaints, the amount of identity theft skyrocketed. So this was in 2020, specifically to Maryland. So Maryland's top fraud report categories, the first one is imposter scams. Then the second one, online shopping and negative reviews, then internet services, and it kind of winds its way down to these other categories. But in Maryland, we had 9,906 fraud reports with a loss of over $15 million. And again, a median average loss is around $300. So let's talk a little bit about some of these scams that are so prevalent and that are seen from a federal level and from a local Maryland level. So there were a lot of scams around the pandemic, anywhere from medications or food or different things that people could take to prevent getting it, or if they did get it, that would help them, none of which were accurate. There were testing scams. There were scams asking people to pay money to get the vaccine. So it's really important during this incredible and unusual health disaster right now that you're being very careful about anything that you're seeing come your way about asking for money, something related to this pandemic. Just know that there are a lot of scams there. The imposter scam, as we talked about before, is one of the highest ranked scams that people are seeing. And this scam is where someone is pretending to be someone that you know, and they're asking for either money directly right up front or access to your personal information. So one of the most typical ones is the grandparent imposter scam, where the grandparent gets a frantic call or a text message from allegedly their grandchild who is somewhere and needs some help desperately. Maybe they've been arrested, maybe they're sick, or maybe they've been traveling and they can't get home. So they need their grandparent to wire them money. They typically will play on their emotions by saying, please don't tell my parents, right, the grandparent's child, because I don't want to get in trouble. And invariably, this happens to so many people where they just go ahead and wire the money and that money is gone. So it's really important, if anyone that you know or you get a message from someone, you need to set up a system of being able to verify if that person really does need some help. So for example, my daughter studied abroad in Spain, and I knew this could possibly happen, and it sure did, where I ended up getting an email saying that something had happened to her. Well, she and I had set up a system that if she really did need something, there was a code word that was going to be involved in this request. And there was no code word given to me, so of course I didn't respond to it. But it's important to think about friends and family in your life, particularly maybe any elderly people that you may know, to have them understand that they need to contact someone. Maybe it is that parent or their child if they're the grandparent, and say, is the grandchild actually really in this country? Are they experiencing difficulty? What is it that we can do together? So instead of responding to these, because these scams are just taking money and leaving people with nothing. Now, a new development recently, and it really skyrocketed in 2020, is these romance scams. This is where people are online, they're meeting someone, they feel they're developing a relationship with them, and invariably within a number of months, a request for money is going to come. Whether it's, I need money in my country where I am or my state where I am because of this, or I would love to come visit you and meet you in person, but I'm going to need some money first to be able to get there. So in 2020, consumers lost $304 million to romance scams. So if you're in a dating app and you are looking for a relationship, just please be very cautious and careful. And when money is asked, that's a red flag. Another one is the IRS scam. And this has been around for many years, where people are getting phone calls from the IRS saying that you haven't paid your taxes or they were incorrect and you need to pay more. At any rate, they're pressuring money from consumers to pay right here, right now. The IRS does not call consumers about their taxes. They absolutely do not. So anyone calling and saying they're from the IRS, just hang up. Another one is a tech support scam. So this one actually also happened to a friend of mine's father who was in his 70s, and he was so excited about being independent online and trying to do his taxes. So he was very confident that he could handle his tax preparation himself by using, one of the typical softwares, whether it's TurboTax or whatever. So he's doing his taxes. Next thing you know, something pops up on the screen. It's like, there's something wrong with your taxes. Please click here and we'll help you. So he didn't know and he clicked on it. Then it went further and further of them trying to so-called help him with his taxes, to the point of where he allowed them to have control of his computer with that remote control app that people can use. Well, next thing you know, they had everything off his computer, his banking, his credit cards, his credit report, Social Security. I mean, everything got wiped off of that computer. So it's really important when we are online, number one, any emails that are coming in, don't click on a link that you don't know exactly who it's coming from and exactly what it is. Don't ever click on those little pop-ups that come up, and make sure that you have the appropriate software and protection on your computer so that you can block any of these attempts. So sort of our maybe not so technologically involved scams, we are seeing a lot of car repair scams. So car repairs are expensive, right? And they're usually filled with stress because it never breaks down at a time when you're ready for it and it's convenient. So you're concerned about, how can I get this fixed? What's the cheapest way to do it? And it's important to make sure you're looking at a car repair shop that has the appropriate licenses, because we saw so many people, particularly again during the pandemic, because some people, really experienced a loss of income, and they turned to other ways to bring the income in, which is taking it from other people and doing nothing, unfortunately. So they were doing car repair out of their homes, out of different storefronts that never ever was licensed to have car repairs done in there. So it's important when you're doing car repairs to make sure that you have your trusted mechanic in place before your car ever breaks down, and that you've checked them out with complaint records and that they have the licenses they need to have. Another variation on this is when you're in a parking lot, someone can approach you and say, oh, I see you have a dent in your car. I can fix that while you're getting your groceries. So while that seems maybe creative and maybe convenient, that is never a way to get car repairs done. You have no idea who that person is. And if you give them access to your car, it just opens up sort of Pandora's box for problems. Not only are they probably maybe not going to do the repairs appropriately, but if you allow them access to your glove box that has your registration in there, they now have your address and all kinds of information that you really don't want them to have. So anyone coming up to you in a parking lot in order to fix your car, just say no. So the home improvement scams have been around, again, forever and ever and ever. Most of them involve door to door, someone knocking on the door and saying, hey, I'm here in the neighborhood down the street doing work at your neighbor's house. I can help you with yours. That is really not the best way to pick a home improvement contractor. There has been a lot of fraud, unfortunately, with people getting access to someone's home, and one person distracts a homeowner while somebody else walks around and does whatever it is they do. And they often will say, oh, I see, a watermark over here. We need to see if we could help you with this leak. And there was never a leak. They went ahead and just, sprayed some water on the wall. So never letting someone in your home, just from a personal safety perspective, and choosing a licensed home improvement contractor is critical. A licensed contractor, while some people think they may charge more than an unlicensed contractor, which may or may not be true, but the protection that you have with a licensed contractor is that, number one, they have gone through the steps, which are not necessarily easy or cheap, to get this license, be able to show their competency, to be able to show their financial stability, and that they have the proper insurance in place. If someone gets, one of their workers gets hurt in your home, they're not coming after you and your homeowner's insurance, they go through their own insurance. But in Maryland, the Department of Labor actually regulates home improvement contractors, as well as many other industries, plumbers, electricians, and others. And they require licensed home improvement contractors to pay into a warranty fund. So if there is a problem with the work that a licensed contractor has done for you, and the commission investigates it because you file a complaint with them, and if they find in your favor, you can actually get money from the warranty fund if that contractor doesn't have the ability to pay you for what the commission said you're owed. So you actually have a lot of protection by hiring a licensed contractor versus using an unlicensed one. So some other scams involve debt collection. Again, more calls or text messages about you owe someone and you need to pay it right now. I've had people tell me that someone called them and said they were the DC police and they hadn't paid their red light cameras, and they would go down the street to arrest them if they didn't pay these tickets over the phone right now. That was never true and not the case. So any kind of debt that you think may be out there, it's best just to handle it proactively yourself versus responding to anyone that's calling or texting you, because you don't know if you actually owe that debt or not, and it could very likely be a scam. So anyone calling, trying to collect money over the phone, no discussions, no admitting any kind of I owe debt. I'm just not going to discuss this now, and hang up. The last one I want to share with you on this one is the credit card alert. So you may have heard about scams where the bank allegedly calls you and says there's a problem with your credit card number, and they want you to give them your credit card number. So we may have heard that in the past, and hopefully we know not to give that out because it is not your bank calling you. Your bank would never ask you for the credit card number if they're calling you for a legitimate problem. But the newest thing we're hearing is the company is calling, or the scam artist is calling and saying there's a problem with your credit card number, your credit card, and they give you your credit card number. They actually have it. And you're like, oh, well, maybe this is my bank because they actually have the right number. And then what they do though is ask you for that 3-digit code on the back. They don't have that number. And so that needs to be a huge red flag, and the discussion is ended, phone call is hung up on, we're not talking to them anymore. Scam artists are getting really good, again, unfortunately, about getting little bits of information from us and piecing it together in a database. Literally, they are companies that exist to collect this information illegally, share it and sell it among themselves, and then continue to try and prey upon us. So any little bits of information add up to them, and we need to not give it to them. For example, I had allegedly a phone call from my pharmacy saying I had a prescription ready to refill. I was busy that day and I wasn't really focusing, and I was like, oh, well, maybe, and I thought about it, I was like, I don't even have a prescription ready to refill. But what they asked me for was, if you just confirm your birthday, we'll be able to get your prescription ready for you. And that's what the bells and whistles went off. I was like, oh, no, you don't. You are not getting my birthday. I am not giving you any information. This conversation is ended. So again, little bits of information are pieced together to really try to perpetrate fraud. So if you can, again, in the chat box, please put any way that you're aware of that identity theft can happen. As you saw, the identity theft numbers are really increasing and are very prevalent in Maryland as well. So what's one way that thieves get our information? So anything that you can put in the chat about how thieves get our personal information.
ATM machines.
ATM machines. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. All right. I appreciate that. And we will move on to discussing deeply about identity theft. So look at these numbers over the past few years. In 2018, right, there's 444,000. In 2019, it jumped up to 650,000. These are identity theft cases that are reported, by the way, to the Federal Trade Commission. I have a feeling there's many, many more that are actually not reported. But if you look at what happened during the pandemic, these numbers more than doubled. 1,387,000 cases of identity theft reported to the Federal Trade Commission. So I just want to show you this breakdown of identity theft by age, because sometimes we might think, oh, that's only really for senior citizens. Those are the ones that are really only victimized by identity theft. If you look at this, one of the largest categories is 30 to 39, followed right after that by 40 to 49. It definitely happens to those in their 50s and 60s. It even happens to those who are 19 and under. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But you can see it really is spread out. In fact, the lowest category of identity theft is for those over 80. So it's important to realize that while we might think from our age that we're savvy enough and it will never happen to us, we need to be aware of all the red flags of it because it could happen to us. And while Maryland is an amazing state to live in, I love being here, it is one of the top 10 states in this country for identity theft. You can see we're ranked at number 6. So we are targeted. So how does identity theft happen? Certainly the great comment in the chat box of being in an ATM that might have a little machine rigged onto it, and so that it's actually capturing your data at the same time you're using the ATM machine, but also data breaches. This is a large way that identity theft is happening over especially the last 5 years. You can see the numbers here through 2017. Just data breaches, meaning that a company's had your personal information because you shop with them, or they're your medical provider or whoever it is, and their data was breached. Either they're an online company, maybe you shop, and therefore their data was taken, but you may recall Home Depot had it happen, Care First Insurance here in Maryland had it happen, the federal government had it happen. So data breaches are a prevalent way that identity theft happens. So it's very challenging as an individual consumer to protect your information from a data breach because you gave it to that company. Hopefully they were trying to protect it, and maybe they just didn't do that somehow. So one of the biggest ways you can protect yourself from a data breach is to ensure that you're using a credit card if you're shopping online, or frankly, if you're shopping almost anywhere. But with a caveat though, of do not get into credit card debt. Credit card debt is not worth it. But what we're trying to do is protect our checking account as best we can from any of these data breaches. So if it's our credit card, it's fairly common to get a call from a credit card company going, did you just spend $3,000 in China? And you can go, no, and they can block that charge. Or if you notice it yourself as you're regularly checking your statements, you can say, this charge was not mine. This is a fraudulent charge. Take it off. They will take it off and investigate it. So a credit card company is much more likely to be able to alert you and to give you notifications or help you if there have been fraudulent charges. Now, your bank will too. It's just going to take a little bit longer typically. And the concern is they're into your grocery money now, right? So it's they're actually taking dollars out of your checking account, and we want to protect that. So for data breaches, some of the protections are to use a credit card versus a debit card. So some other ways that identity theft happens is that skimming device that we talked about. It's typically put on ATMs. It can also be used in stores, restaurants. It's literally the size of a cell phone, and whoever has your card runs it through that as well as for your transaction. So if you can, encourage your local restaurants, and I've seen many of them start switching to this, of where the server comes to your table with their machine in their hand. So they're not going back into the kitchen or wherever to run the card, which means they could also run it through a skimmer. They're doing it right there at the table and they're giving it back to you. So encourage ways that you're not actually going to have your card taken away from you and out of your sight, and that you can be able to see it's been used in the skimmer or not. Another way certainly is still paper mail. If for some reason your mailbox, as is mine, is open and people can get to it, try to make sure you're not putting any payments by check into that mailbox and then putting a little red flag up, and that you're getting your mail on a regular basis so someone isn't driving down the street to get it. We certainly again have the hacking computer networks and databases. We talked about that. So IT equipment is something to be very careful about. If you're getting rid of either this flash drive on here or a laptop or a cell phone that has personal information on it, you need to make sure you're either appropriately doing it yourself or getting it professionally done so that it is wiped clean and does not have personal information on there. So we also still certainly have our shoulder surfing of where we're at a store or an ATM or wherever, and we're putting our PIN in. And so sometimes if people see that, they can actually try and see what our PIN is, then they're going to perhaps attempt to steal our cards, and then they have the information they need to go shopping. So just being careful when you're in a store, and that's why most stores have put the little shields over the little PIN pads so that it's not as easy to see what the PIN is. And then lastly, we also still have our dumpster diving. So we have people who are going into the trash and pulling out personal information. So while I don't generally like to recommend people buy things, because we're all trying to make sure that we are keeping our finances in a good place, it might not hurt to have a shredder to make sure that any personal documentation you have is not going intact into a trash can. Sometimes there are local shredding events that you can access where they will shred it for you. And I think they're great events. They're very helpful. I just make sure that when I take my box of my mother's old documents, that really needed to be disposed of, that I actually watch and see that it goes into the truck and it is shredded. So just stay there until it's done. So some other ways are, unfortunately, employees of different companies or organizations. And that's just sometimes somebody is really desperate for some extra income and they turn to an unfortunate way to go get it. And with that, the only way to protect yourself is to really ask the employees wherever you are. doctor's office, government agency, business, wherever, when they're getting personal information because perhaps they legitimately need it, maybe the doctor's office needs your social security to be able to access your health insurance, whatever that might be, ask them specifically, why do you need this information? What are you going to do with it? And how are you going to protect it? So making sure that all of us as consumers are out there holding these businesses as accountable as we can to say, look, I know this is from my personal information and I have my eye on you and I want to make sure you're taking care of it. So as much as you can, try and protect yourself that way. And then any kind of phone messages, phone calls, text messages that are asking for personal information or trying to get you to click on a link, just ignore them. Just don't even respond to them. Same thing with emails. You can see this is a sample email here that says it's customer service from yourfinancialinstitution.com. Anytime you're getting something from your financial institutions from an email, always either go directly to the institution by phone or by email, or if you're local and want to go down to your bank, do that. Don't respond to an email or text that's coming from them allegedly to you, and making sure that you know who they really are. So contests are another way that sometimes we get really excited about the option of like, oh, we might be able to win some money, or we might be able to win this item or something. And so we were putting out personal information just to be entered into these contests. These contests, generally speaking, are designed in order to get personal information, put it in this huge database that I've talked about, and sell it. You're likely not going to win that item. So start reducing who has access to your personal information and avoid these kind of contests. And unfortunately, one way that identity theft does happen is by friends and family. So just making sure we're being aware, we're being cautious. If we're in a roommate situation, I know I've had many people say that they've had credit cards that came to the house in their name, but in their roommate's name as well. So the roommate had actually taken their identity and opened up accounts. So just be careful and cautious with those in your life to make sure that they're not committing identity theft to you. So what are some ways that you can protect yourself from being a victim of identity theft? Well, we talked about the credit card versus the debit card. So making sure we're thinking about doing that, minimizing who has access to any information. Make sure you're checking your credit reports annually. You have a right by the federal law and under Maryland law to get a copy of your credit report every year from each of the credit reporting bureaus. There's the three main ones that we know of: Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. There's a lot of others, but at least if we do those three through the website of www.annualcreditreport.com, we can make sure that accounts are not being opened up in our name that we don't know about. Please make sure you're checking your bank and credit card statements, shredding the materials that you have that have personal information on them, never giving out any personal information, including something so small as your birthday, over a phone or an email. And then make sure, and I know how difficult it is to remember passwords. I really struggled with this for a while. I finally got an online secure tool that I use to put all my passwords in because there's so many different ones I have. But making sure that you're using strong passwords, and if you can, particularly for your banking website that you use double authentication. What that is where you would go to log in, but before it will finally let you actually access it, it will send a security code, perhaps to your cell phone. You then have to put that in before you can get into your bank's website. So try and use that to avoid anybody else being able to get in there. And then if you're somewhere that there's free Wi-Fi, maybe it's a coffee shop or restaurant, just be very careful, because those free Wi-Fi, it's awesome to have access to the internet, but they're not as protected as the one in your home. So there could easily be someone sitting right next to you being able to look at everything you're doing because they're accessing that network. So never, ever go into any personal financial websites that you have when you're using free Wi-Fi. So I also just wanted to alert you that medical identity theft is on the rise as well. This is where someone is stealing your information about your health insurance and obtaining medical care in your name. And one of the things that you can do to protect yourself that way is to make sure you actually look at those explanation of benefits that are sent to you on a monthly or quarterly basis to make sure all those medical procedures that are listed there were actually for you. And we talked a little bit about children under 19. So unfortunately, while you wouldn't think that anyone under 18 should be able to get credit, of course, identity thieves have figured out a way to use a child's social security number to obtain credit accounts. And so you can see that 1 out of 40 homes with children per year actually are victimized with this. And they often don't know it until they turn 18 or 21 and go to access credit themselves. So fortunately in Maryland, we're very fortunate that the law allows the caregivers for a minor to put a freeze on the minor's record. So no credit can be opened up. So you can see here, Equifax has their own form. The Maryland Attorney General's office has information on this. So if you have a young person in your life, you might want to consider doing this. Tax identity theft is also on the rise. And again, Maryland is one of the top 10 states for tax identity theft. In fact, the Maryland Attorney General was a victim of this himself. And this is where someone obtains your information. They may tweak it and change it in terms of income and all the different numbers that are on there, but they file a return in your name. Of course, they've got it set up so that they're going to get a very nice refund on that return, and it's going to go to them. Then you go to file your taxes. The IRS is like, wait a minute, it's already been filed. It can be remedied, of course, but it is long and painstaking. So the main advice with this is to file your taxes as early as possible. You basically have to beat the tax identity theft scam artists to the IRS. You need to get there first so that it's actually accurate, your information, versus the scam artist who's going to try and file. So if identity theft happens to you or anyone that you know, what do we do? So the Federal Trade Commission is a really good resource. They have this great pamphlet that's online as well called Taking Charge, What to Do If Your Identity is Stolen. And some of the next steps that you're going to do is to file a police report. And this is primarily done to provide the documentation that you are taking this seriously. This really did happen. I really, I'm not, making these up or doing a fraudulent kind of claim. It's really true. It really happened. The police take a report. You get a copy of it. You can file that with your complaint with the Federal Trade Commission or other organizations. You're going to check your credit reports to make sure that nothing else has been opened up in your name that needs to be addressed. You can either put a fraud alert or a freeze on your credit. And the difference between these two are the fraud alert. Basically, you're going to put that on all 3 of the main credit reporting agencies. It's free to do so. Both of them are. And the fraud alert basically means that the company where credit would be potentially opened up in your name, they have to do additional verification to ensure that it's you. So this one you can do, and it's fairly easy to go ahead and get credit in your name by showing that additional verification. But others would have a difficult time because they may not have multiple different identifications that prove that they are you when they're not. Now the freeze on your credit is exactly what it sounds like. It shuts down credit in your name so that neither you or anyone else can get credit in your name. It completely shuts down the option to open up any new credit accounts. Now, it's also now, recently, nicely, fairly easy for you to put a freeze on, unfreeze it when you want credit, and put the freeze back on. So it's really something to consider. The other step you're going to take is to contact your credit card companies and your bank to let them know you've been a victim of identity theft and which charges or deductions from your account are fraudulent. Make sure you do that as soon as possible. That's why it's important to keep an eye on all the transactions in your checking account, all the transactions on a credit card. You cannot let this go for months and then go back and try to make a claim. You need to address this as soon as possible. Always making sure you're putting new passwords. If something's been compromised, change them, put a stronger one on there. And then make sure you're filing a complaint with the Consumer Protection Agency and the Federal Trade Commission. So we need to talk a little bit about these companies that, because identity theft is so prevalent, companies have actually come into existence to say, you know what, I'm going to help consumers remediate or figure out what to do when they've been a victim, or help them prevent being a victim of identity theft. And many consumers find this helpful because they're concerned about identity theft and they like to have either a credit monitoring service or some other type of protection that is alerting them when new credit's been opened up in their name, and or will be there to help them if they've been a victim of identity theft. So you've probably heard of LifeLock or other type of companies. Sometimes though, your own insurance company offers this protection as part of your insurance premium. So you don't have to pay anything extra for it. Some companies charge anywhere between $15 to $25 a month. And if that's an expense that you really want to do and that fits in your budget, then that's fine. However, what you can do is think about checking your credit throughout the year so that you're sort of doing your own credit monitoring. You have the right under federal law to get a copy of your credit report from each of those credit reporting agencies, the three that we've talked about. So that's three. You also have a separate right under Maryland law to obtain a copy of your credit report from each of those credit reporting agencies as well. So that's another three. So you could actually get 6 credit reports under federal and state law and kind of do it every other month if you want to monitor your credit yourself to make sure that no credit's being opened up in your name that you're not aware of. In addition, due to the pandemic, all of the credit reporting bureaus are offering a credit report per week for free until April of 2022. So with these companies that offer these services to either monitor your credit or help you remediate that if you have been a victim of identity theft, you have to be careful because their services, their prices, and their guarantees are all over the board. You have got to read all the fine print for what they say they're going to offer to make sure that it is going to be a benefit to you. So check them out very carefully before subscribing to one of these services. So switching just for a minute from scams to consumer mistakes that may cost you money, I just want to go over 3 quick quiz questions. So if you can, in the chat box, you could put in a true or false, and we can play this game together. So the first one is, if you buy an item and you have the receipt and the tags are still on it, right? You've got a shirt, you've never worn it, you got home, you don't like it, can you return it to the store within 30 days? True or false? You drop that in the chat box, that'd be very helpful. Do you have the right to return items to the stores?
Sometimes yes, but sometimes no.
We have some smart consumers on this webinar today. So Maryland law allows a store to have whatever refund policy it is they want. From the walk out that door, don't return it, it's yours, you know, you've lost your right to bring this back, all the way to the famous kind of Nordstrom one of like, wear it for a year and return anyway, we're fine. They can have whatever return policy it is they want, but they have to tell the consumer what it is. So there has to be a sign in the store or a sign on the actual item itself, you know, a tag on that, or on the receipt. So be sure, because people are losing a lot of hard-earned dollars to things that they've purchased that they cannot return. So make sure you know the return policies, and they are changing due to the economic times. Often what had been a 90-day return policy is now a 30-day. What had been a 30-day is now 2 weeks, or you can exchange it only. So make sure you know what the return policy is when you're buying something. Now, our next one is, if you buy an item that is defective, so it's not working, and the store has a no refund policy, well, that's too bad, you're out of luck. True or false?
True.
So, true.
Oh, someone says false.
True and a false. Thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate that. It's hard during these to actually not see everybody, you know, in person and get that response. So Maryland is very, very fortunate that we have strong consumer protection laws. And this is actually false because the law that applies is not the refund policy, because you're not bringing it back because you don't like the color. You're bringing it back because it doesn't work. So Maryland has implied warranties that say an item needs to be fit for the purpose for which it was purchased for a reasonable amount of time. Now, there's a lot of arguing about fit for purpose and reasonable time, but basically, if something isn't working, both the store, the retailer, and the manufacturer have equal legal responsibilities to either repair it, replace it, or refund your money. Now, it's their options of which ones to do, and many of them aren't repairing things anymore. They likely will replace it. But the store doesn't have the option to say to the consumer, well, I'm really sorry your big dining room table doesn't work. You need to ship it back to the manufacturer and have them fix it. It's the store's equal responsibility to help the consumer. All right, our last one. If you sign a contract to purchase furniture, you have 3 days to cool off and cancel that contract. So you order a piece of furniture, you get home, you didn't do your measurements before you went and bought the piece of furniture. You come home, you measure, you go, oh my gosh, it's not going to fit. So do I have the right in 3 days to cancel that contract? True or false?
Is that true?
Again, thank you for helping out here. This is actually false. So the 3-day right to cancel, that got a lot of outreach and publicity because it finally gave consumers some rights to get out of contracts. The 3-day right to cancel concept only applies to very specific contracts. Door-to-door home improvement sales, gym memberships. It's very, very limited as to what contracts the consumer has the ability to take a look at it and cancel within 3 days. Generally speaking, if you sign a contract, you are going to be obligated to that contract. So be very careful and make sure you read all of those little words that might be very hard to read, because those are what bind you to that contract. Now, in Maryland, again, because of the difficulties with some furniture stores, we do have some rights in terms of furniture and appliances that if the store isn't going to be able to meet its delivery date, and then within a certain time period, we may be able to cancel that contract because they're not meeting their end of the contract. But generally speaking, when you sign a contract, you're going to be obligated to it. So thank you all very much for this. So let's go through a couple of these, and I'm just going to tell you the answers for them in interest of time. So a store can charge you a checkout fee if you use a credit card. So this came about fairly recently due to lawsuits that were filed, and a store actually has the legal right to say, I am incurring cost. When you use a credit card, the store has to pay a percentage of your purchase to either Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, whoever issues the card. So that's how those companies make their money, is off of these fees from consumer purchases. So stores said, you know what, this is costing me money. That's not fair. I'm passing that charge on to my consumer. And they actually can do it. Generally speaking, though, most stores aren't doing it, and particularly not the large stores. And if they're going to do it, again, they have to notify you, the consumer, by a sign that says, if you use a credit card, you're going to be charged 4% more because I am then incurring those costs. Conversely, you may see some companies that are giving a discount if you pay cash. So they're all trying to, especially small businesses, are all trying to figure out how do they maximize their income and incur less cost. So something else to know about with thrift stores, which are an awesome place to find used items. Just be careful with things, particularly electronics and especially children's items, because thrift stores just do not have the staff, and they're not legally required to check for any recalls from the Consumer Product Safety Commission before they actually sell them. So if you're then looking at electronics or children's items, make sure you're checking the CPSC's website before buying it to make sure you're buying a safe item. And then our last one relates a little bit to the contract one that we just talked about. Many people would call in consumer protection on Monday morning and say, I just bought a car on Sunday. I got it at nighttime and I'm up now in the morning. I don't like the color, so I want to take it back. Unfortunately, most car dealers, most times the consumer is not going to be able to allow to return the car. Number one, never buy a car at night. You can't really see the real color of it. Make sure you read all of the contract to understand whether you do have a right to return the car, and if so, what is that time period? Some car dealers are allowing consumers a week or maybe even 10 days to drive the car and bring it back. It's one of their business models that they feel will help them get more customers than the one down the street that doesn't do that. But generally speaking, under law, a consumer does not have the right to return a car once they've purchased it. Now, if there's issues with defective parts or something, that's a whole nother way to handle the situation. But generally speaking, to return it, you may not have the right to do so. So one resource to us as consumers is complaint databases. So the consumer protection agencies all have their databases of who they've gotten complaints about, and they make them public. So it helps us as consumers go on the website and look like, oh, look at this. This car dealer has 350 complaints, whereas this one over here has 2. That gives you an idea of who you might want to do business with. So you want to compare the types of complaints, what the issue was, what the company responded, what did they do? Did they solve it for the consumer or not? So these are a big resource for us when we're choosing who to do business with. We want to make sure to prevent consumer fraud that we are really looking at consumer research, right? That we're checking out the items before we purchase it, whether we're using consumer reports or online reviews, friends or family recommendations, that we're not just making an impulse buy because something is in front of us or online. So make sure that we're not doing this impromptu kind of, last minute response decisions. We want to make sure we're learning skills and teaching other people about how to shop and how to negotiate, how to, again, ask for those discounts. And our main message is that you're in charge until that money has gone out of your hand, or that card has been swiped, or a check has been written. Once that's happened, you don't have as much leverage. When you have still got the money and the person wants the money, that's the time to make sure everything gets in writing, that you've done your research, and that you're getting the product for the best price you can. Read every single thing in contracts and proposals, and minimize any personal information being shared. So I just want to wrap us up with, if we need to complain. So maybe something's gone wrong, we've got an item that's defective, we've been a victim of identity theft, what are we going to do? So complaints really do result in action being taken. So there are government agencies that are really actually responsible for enforcing consumer protection laws. So you can see with this, the Federal Trade Commission got a court order against a phantom debt scheme. So a company that was literally just taking money from people that was good. They were threatening to sue people. They never owned the debt. They were completely fraudulent. So the Federal Trade Commission actually got a court order against them. The other one over here with the Attorney General's office, they got $45 million settlement with a mortgage company. That money was going back in restitution to consumers. So not only do consumer protection agencies stop fraudulent companies, they attempt to get restitution for consumers who have lost money due to a company's actions. And then the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau actually took action against this company for its role in deceiving consumers, repaying loans that they didn't owe. So it really does matter. And the only way consumer protection agencies can take action if companies are violating consumer protection laws is if they know about it from consumers. So your resources are on the federal level, Federal Trade Commission, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. On the state level, we have the State Attorney General's Office, Consumer Protection Division. We also have the Department of Labor, Division of Financial Regulation. And on the local level, if you live in Montgomery or Howard County, you have a local consumer protection agency. So I just want to show you that Federal Trade Commission actually received 1.66 million consumer complaints, and they got $106.8 million in restitution for those consumers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in 2020 had 500,000 complaints. Now, their jurisdiction is primarily around financial transactions. So it's going to be credit, debit cards, bank accounts, mortgages, student loans, all the things that are listed here. This 500,000 complaints was an increase of 54% in 1 year. So consumer complaints are happening, they are increasing, and we need to protect ourselves to avoid losing money. Maryland Attorney General's Office, the Consumer Protection Division, has a great educational website. So make sure you're taking a look at it for all of their tips, whether it's around identity theft or all the different kind of consumer purchases. They have a lot of information about auto repairs and defective vehicles. So check them out and use their resources. The Office of Commissioner of Financial Regulation. This division of the Department of Labor regulates all kinds of different, from a state level, all kinds of different financial products and services. So again, they are a government agency. It's your tax dollars at work. Make sure you're using them if you need to file a complaint or get information beforehand. And then Montgomery County, as we said, and Howard County have their own websites, their own consumer databases, and their own consumer investigators. So if you need to file a complaint, please try to be clear and concise. Have all of your documentations, your receipts, Make sure you're complaining close to when the dispute happened, not letting it go too far along. Let them know what you want. I want a refund, or I want this item repaired, whatever it is. You can also file a complaint with a credit card issuer, Visa, MasterCard, your own individual credit card company. And lastly, if you need to, use social media if you're not able to get a response for your complaint, but make sure you're not being inflammatory or saying anything that could be used against you. So you're being very factual. I had a complaint against this company. They have not resolved it. These companies all have people who monitor social media, and you may get a response from that where you may not have gotten one from a letter or an email. If you need to, use the state agencies that we just talked about to see if you can file a complaint with them. And you can do the Better Business Bureau, which is a nonprofit third-party mediation organization that handles complaints against their member businesses. They're very good at mediating disputes because their members like to keep their records, very positive. And then lastly, Consumer Action, which is a national consumer nonprofit, has a how to complain guide, a sample letter, an email that you can use to format your complaint if you need to. Call for Action is a local TV station that has their own mediation and investigating staff that often are able to resolve consumer complaints in the Washington area. So just to wrap up, try to resolve any kind of complaint that you may have with the merchant directly. Go to a manager if you need to. Make sure to complain when you haven't gotten the response that you wanted. But put a complaint in writing, keep your documentation, make sure you're very clear about the resolution that you want, and turn to the state regulators and licensing boards and trade organizations for help if you need that. So with that, Nora, I would wrap it up and give a minute or two for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sue. I definitely learned a lot about how to not be taken advantage of. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. So if anybody has any question, feel free to put it in the chat and I'm happy to get to it.
And I will throw my email address in the chat just in case anyone thinks of a question later or has anything to follow up with.
All right, well, Nora, if there aren't any questions from everybody, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you, Nora, for the opportunity to work with you and the great campaign of webinars that you're putting on for this month. And hope everyone checks out your remaining webinars and signs up for another one.
Thank you very much. All right, have a nice evening, everybody.
All right, thanks. Take care, everyone.